Did Jesus resurrect himself? See the Gospel of John, chapter 2, verse 19 to 21. Jesus answered and said unto them, Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. The Jews therefore said, 6 years was this temple in building, and wilt thou raise it up in 3 days? But he spoke of the temple of his body. I think the answer lies in the Gospel of John chapter 5, verses 19 to 23. Then Jesus answered and said to them, Most assuredly I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he sees the Father do. For whatsoever he does, the Son also does in like manner. For the Father loves the Son, and shows him all things that he himself does, and he will show him greater works than these, that you may marvel. For as the Father raises the dead, and gives life to them, even so the Son gives life to whom he will. For the Father judges no one, but has committed all judgment to the Son, that all should honour the Son, just as they honour the Father. He who does not honour the Son does not honour the Father who sent him. This makes it clear that all power and possibilities that Jesus had were in fact given to him by God. In fact, whatever God is spoken of as doing, it would be appropriate to speak of the Son doing. This was and is the nature of their relationship. The one thing that it would seem God did for Jesus in a way that Jesus could not do for himself was the resurrection of Jesus from the dead by God. It is emphasized so many times that God raised Jesus from the dead, and yet it's as if Jesus almost enjoys making the point that even in that, so connected is he with the Father that in a sense he raised himself up, because whatever God does in a sense, Jesus therefore does it too. This is why Jesus could say about his life in John chapter 10 and verse 18, I have power, authority to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This commandment received I from my Father. He was given this authority by the Father. Jesus had authority to take his life again, because as he himself says, this commandment have I received of my Father. It is not therefore Jesus who does something for himself. The Son can do nothing of himself. John chapter 5 and verse 19, I can of my own self do nothing. John chapter 5 and verse 30. But even in the very thing where it seems God would be separate from his Son, in resurrecting the Son, Jesus wanted to emphasize that in a sense he was still united with the Father, because the Father so loved the Son that whatever the Father did, he wished his Son to somehow be associated with, and so Jesus can speak of how, in that sense, he was involved in his own resurrection, even though the repeated and obvious biblical emphasis is upon the Father resurrecting his Son back to life. We see this theme touched on again in John chapter 10 and verse 18, where the Lord teaches that he has received a commandment to lay down his life and take it again, and yet he says that he has been given the authority, empowerment to do this, and therefore he will not die merely because of being unable to avoid the schemes of his murderers. So we could conclude that he obeyed a commandment to die and rise again, but was empowered by God to do this. In many places the New Testament writers refer to the resurrection of Christ. Not one writer, however, states that Jesus raised himself from the dead. In every reference it is God who raises Christ, not God the Son who raises the Son of Man. Note the following passages: whom God has raised up, having loosened the pains of death, Acts chapter 2 and verse 24. This Jesus has God raised up, Acts chapter 2 and verse 32. Another consideration in the Gospel of John chapter 2 and verses 19 to 21 is that Jesus speaks specifically about the raising up of his body as a tabernacle. The body of Christ frequently refers not so much to his literal body as to his spiritual body, the body of believers. In a sense, it is Jesus who has raised them up. John chapter 10 and verse 17 and 18. Therefore does my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it again. No man takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father. So the problem with this verse is, it is argued by Trinitarians that if Jesus had power to lay down his life and take it again, then the God part, God the Son, must have continued to live while the body, the Son of Man, lay dead in the grave. The Trinitarian argument mistakenly rests on the word power. The Greek word translated power is rendered authority in 29 other references. Take for example Matthew chapter 7 and verse 29, Matthew chapter 21 and verse 23, Luke chapter 7 and verse 8, etc. Another translation renders this passage as follows: no one is taking it away from me, but I myself am laying it down. I am authorized to receive it back again. This translation is in harmony with the following statements of Jesus. The Son can do nothing of himself. John chapter 5 and verse 19. I can of my own self do nothing. John chapter 5 and verse 30. Jesus had authority to take his life again, because, as he himself said, this commandment have I received of my Father. Verse 18. It is not therefore Jesus who does something for himself. In many places in the New Testament, the writers refer to the resurrection of Christ. Not one of them, however, states that Jesus raised himself from the dead. In every reference it is God who raises Christ, not God the Son who raises the Son of Man. Note the following passages: whom God has raised up, having loosened the pains of death. Acts chapter 2 and verse 24. This Jesus has God raised up. Acts chapter 2 and verse 32. Jesus was unable to do anything for himself once dead, because the dead know not anything. Ecclesiastes chapter 9 and verse 5.